The stench of fear hung heavy in the cramped auction hall, mixing with the acrid smoke of cheap stimulants and the sweat of 100 different species. Reed Talon stood in the shadows at the edge of the stage, his human features partially obscured by the hood of his worn flight jacket. He'd been to these intergalactic slave markets before, always watching, always gathering evidence, always leaving with his stomach in knots and his fists clenched in helpless rage. Tonight was different. He could feel it in the electric tension that crackled through the room. "Next lot," announced the auctioneer, a tall Venaxian with 6 arms and skin like polished obsidian. His voice boomed through amplifiers, echoing off the metal walls. 2 specimens from the outer rim. Category: non-labor, non-entertainment. The crowd's murmurs quieted as 2 figures were pushed onto the stage. Reed's breath caught in his throat. They were clearly female, though not human. The smaller one had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, delicate features, and enormous eyes that reflected the harsh spotlights like twin moons. She trembled visibly, her thin arms wrapped around herself, chains rattling with each shudder. Her companion was taller, with deep purple skin, marked by intricate patterns that might have been natural or might have been ritual scarification. Unlike the first, she stood rigid, teeth bared in a snarl, eyes burning with defiance despite the heavy restraints that bound her. "Specimens from the Lumira system," the auctioneer continued. "The blue one, designation Luma, is classified as too gentle. No practical use for hard labor, too timid for entertainment. The purple one, designation Jera, classified as too wild. Attempts at domestication have failed. Multiple handlers injured." A ripple of cruel laughter moved through the crowd. "Starting bid is low. Gentle beings. 500 credits for the pair. They must be sold together as they appear to have formed a dependency bond." Reed studied the 2 women more carefully. Luma had shifted slightly behind Jera, who had positioned herself protectively despite her chains. It was subtle, but unmistakable. They were protecting each other. The silence in the hall was deafening. 500 credits, the auctioneer repeated, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "Surely someone can find a use for them? Experimental subjects? Trophy specimens?" Still, no hands or tentacles or appendages rose to make a bid. "Too wild and too gentle," someone in the crowd jeered. "Useless waste of cargo space." The auctioneer's mouth twisted. "Very well. If there are no bids, these specimens will be disposed of. The Lumira system is now officially depleted. These are the last of their kind. Such a shame to waste genetic material. But business is business." Reed stepped forward before he had fully formed the thought. "I'll take them." The auctioneer's 6 arms froze in mid-gesture. The crowd turned as one entity to stare at the human who had spoken. "You wish to make a bid, sir?" The auctioneer recovered quickly, professional smile returning. "No," Reed said, continuing his walk toward the stage. "I'm not buying them. I'm taking them." Confusion rippled through the crowd, followed by amusement. The auctioneer's smile tightened. "Sir, this is an auction house. If you wish to acquire property, you must—" "They're not property," Reed interrupted, now standing directly before the stage. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, holding it up so everyone could see the flashing official emblem. "I am Reed Talon, designated representative of the Galactic Sentient Rights Commission. Under Resolution 7729, I am exercising emergency protective custody of these individuals pending investigation of rights violations." The laughter died. The auctioneer's obsidian face darkened to a dangerous midnight blue. "The Commission has no jurisdiction here. We operate under free trade zone regulations." Reed smiled thinly. "Actually, 3 cycles ago, the Galactic Council extended Commission authority to all zones. Your information is outdated. Now, release them to my custody, or I'll be forced to call in the Enforcement Division." It was a bluff. Of course. The commission existed, but it was toothless, underfunded, and largely ignored. The enforcement division was two overworked Xandorian bureaucrats with a single, outdated shuttle. But Reed had learned long ago that confidence and the right documentation could work miracles. The auctioneer hesitated, 6 hands twitching as he calculated the risks. "The paperwork will take hours to process," he finally said. Reed's smile never wavered. "I have all night." 3 tense hours later, Reed guided the 2 women toward his ship, docked in the shadowy lower levels of the spaceport. Luma still wore restraints, the auctioneer had insisted, but Jera had been deemed too dangerous and remained in a containment field that hovered around her like a transparent bubble. Neither had spoken a word. Reed's ship, the Horizon Seeker, was an older model cargo hauler, modified for long-distance solo travel. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. The entry ramp lowered at his approach. "This is my ship," he said quietly, not looking directly at either of them. "It's safe here." Once inside, Reed immediately moved to the control panel near the entry. "I'm going to remove your restraints now. The containment field first." Jera's eyes narrowed suspiciously as he approached. The purple markings on her face seemed to pulse with her rapid breathing. "I'm not going to hurt you," Reed said, entering the shutdown code on the field generator. "I just want to—" The containment field dissolved, and Jera lunged forward with startling speed. Her fist connected with Reed's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Before he could recover, she had leapt to Luma's side, placing herself between the smaller woman and Reed. Reed touched his jaw, tasting blood where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I deserved that for not explaining better." He took a deliberate step back, raising his hands. "I'm going to release Luma's restraints now. Then I'll show you where you can rest, eat, clean up. After that, we'll talk about what happens next." Jera hissed something in a language Reed didn't understand. Her stance remained defensive, but she didn't try to stop him as he carefully approached Luma. The blue-skinned woman trembled as he used the electronic key to unlock her restraints, but she didn't pull away. The heavy cuffs fell to the deck with a clang that made Luma jump. She rubbed her wrists, staring at Reed with those enormous, luminous eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, the universal translator in Reed's collar, barely catching the words. Reed nodded, then gestured toward the corridor. "This way. There's a passenger cabin you can use." He led them through the ship, conscious of Jera's burning gaze on his back. The passenger cabin was small, but comfortable. A bunk built into the wall, a small table, a tiny private washroom. "You can stay here together if you prefer," Reed said. "There's another cabin across the corridor if you want separate spaces. The door locks from the inside. You control it." Luma looked around the room with wide eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Jera remained in the doorway, her body still tense, ready to fight or flee. "I'll bring you some food and clean clothes," Reed continued. "There are towels in the washroom if you want to clean up. Take all the time you need. We won't be leaving dock until morning cycle." He turned to go, but Jera's voice stopped him. "Why?" The word was harsh, guttural, as if she wasn't used to speaking the common trade language. Reed looked back at her. "Why what?" "Why take us?" Reed considered his answer carefully. "Because you're people, not property. Because no one deserves to be auctioned or disposed of. Because it was the right thing to do." Jera's eyes narrowed further. "What you want from us?" "Nothing," Reed said simply. "I want for you what every sentient being deserves, freedom to choose your own path." He left them then, feeling Jera's distrustful gaze following him down the corridor. In the ship's small galley, Reed prepared a simple meal. A protein stew that was bland but nutritious, some synthesized fruit that most species found palatable, and purified water. He placed everything on a tray, added 2 sets of basic clothing from his emergency supplies, and returned to the passenger cabin. He knocked lightly on the door. "Food and clothes," he called. After a moment, the door slid open a few inches. Jarrah stood there, still glaring. Reed held out the tray. "May I come in? Or would you prefer to take this?" Jarrah stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back, allowing the door to open fully. Reed entered cautiously. Luma sat on the edge of the bunk, her delicate hands folded in her lap. She'd washed her face, and without the grime of the auction house, her blue skin seemed to glow with a subtle inner light. Jarrah, by contrast, looked as if she hadn't moved except to open the door, her body still coiled with tension. Reed set the tray on the small table. "It's not gourmet, but it's hot and it'll fill your stomachs. The clothes might not fit perfectly, but they're clean. I'll leave you to eat in peace." As he turned to go, he noticed Luma staring at the food with a mixture of longing and hesitation. On impulse, he picked up one of the bowls of stew and held it out to her. "It's safe," he said softly. "See?" He took a small spoonful and ate it himself, then offered the bowl again. Luma's delicate fingers brushed against his as she took the bowl. She dipped one finger into the stew, brought it to her lips, and tasted it cautiously. Her eyes widened slightly, and she took the spoon Reed offered. "Thank you," she whispered again. Reed nodded and turned to go, but was stopped by the sound of shattering ceramic. Jarrah had grabbed the second bowl and hurled it against the wall, where it exploded in a spray of stew and broken pieces. "No trust," she snarled. "No trust you." Reed didn't flinch. He looked at the mess, then back at Jarrah. "That's fair. I wouldn't trust me either, in your position." He walked to the door, then paused. "I'll bring another bowl later, in case you change your mind. And some cleaning supplies for the wall." He left them alone, the door sliding shut behind him. In the corridor, he leaned against the wall and let out a long, slow breath. This was going to be more complicated than he'd anticipated. Over the next few days, as the Horizon Seeker journeyed through the void between star systems, a cautious routine developed. Reed brought food 3 times during each ship day cycle, left fresh clothes and toiletries as needed, and otherwise gave the 2 women their space. He spent most of his time in the cockpit, plotting their course away from established trade routes where slavers might be looking for them. Luma gradually became less fearful. By the 3rd day, she would accept food directly from Reed's hands without trembling. By the 5th, she had begun to ask hesitant questions about the ship, about space, about Reed himself. Her voice was soft and musical, with an accent that made common words sound like poetry. Jarrah remained hostile, though the nature of her hostility evolved. She stopped destroying the food Reed brought, instead watching him with narrowed eyes as she ate, as if daring him to try to take it away. She never thanked him, never initiated conversation, but Reed sometimes caught her listening intently when he answered Luma's questions. On the 7th day, Reed brought them to the cockpit to show them the navigation system. "We're here," he said, pointing to a pulsing blue dot on the holographic star chart. "Heading toward the Outer Rim territories. It's less developed out there. Fewer people asking questions about documentation." "What will happen to us?" Luma asked, her luminous eyes fixed on the swirling galaxies in the display. Reed leaned back in the pilot's chair. "That depends on what you want. I can take you to a commission outpost. They'll provide temporary sanctuary while they process your case. Or I can drop you at any port where you might have contacts. People you know." "No people," Jarrah said abruptly. "All dead." Reed turned to look at her. It was the first time she'd volunteered information. "All your people are gone?" Jarrah's purple skin darkened around her cheekbones. "Miners come. Take minerals. Poison water. Poison air. People get sick. Die. Some taken. Sold." She gestured sharply at herself and Luma. "Last ones. The matter-of-fact way she described genocide hit Reed like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," he said inadequately. Jarrah shrugged, the motion stiff and unnatural, as if she were imitating a gesture she'd seen. "Not your doing." "Still," Reed said, "no one should have to endure that." Luma's soft voice broke the heavy silence that followed. "What is that?" She pointed to a small, pulsing red light on the control panel. Reed frowned, leaning forward to examine it. "Proximity alert. Something's approaching." He tapped rapidly at the controls, bringing up an external view on the main screen. Damn! A sleek black ship was visible in the distance, closing fast. "Is that bad?" Luma asked, her voice small. "Depends on who's flying it," Reed muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "But, given our location and the fact that it's running with identification transponders off, I'm guessing it's not friendly." The comm system crackled to life. "Cargo vessel Horizon Seeker," a rough voice announced. "This is Recovery Team Theta 9. You are in possession of stolen property registered to the Venaxian Trade Consortium. Power down and prepare to be boarded." Jarrah hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pressure valve. Luma shrank back, her blue skin paling to a sickly gray. Reed hit the comm switch. "Negative. Theta 9. No stolen property aboard. Just me and my registered cargo. Check the manifests if you like. Our scanners detect 3 life forms. Human. Power down, or we will disable your engines and take what is ours by force." Reed cut the communication and turned to the 2 women. "Go back to your cabin and lock the door. No matter what happens, don't come out until I call for you. Understood?" Luma nodded, trembling, but Jarrah stood her ground. "Fight," she said, her voice hard. "I fight." Reed shook his head. "No, protect Luma. That's more important." For a moment, he thought she would argue, but something in his expression must have convinced her. She grabbed Luma's arm and pulled her toward the corridor. Reed turned back to the controls, running quick calculations. The Horizon Seeker wasn't built for speed or combat, but he'd made some modifications over the years. He had a few tricks that might give them a chance. He diverted power from non-essential systems to the engines and shields. Then, threw the ship into a steep dive, accelerating toward a dense field of stellar debris that showed on his scanners. The pursuing ship followed, closing the distance with alarming speed. A warning klaxon sounded as energy weapons locked onto the Horizon Seeker. Reed cursed and executed a series of evasive maneuvers, banking hard around a massive chunk of what might once have been a small moon. The first volley of shots missed, superheating the space where his ship had been moments before. Reed led the pursuit deeper into the debris field, using the larger fragments as cover. The Horizon Seeker shuddered as smaller pieces impacted against the shields, but he pushed on, looking for the right opportunity. There, a narrow passage between 2 slowly rotating asteroids, barely wide enough for his ship to pass through. Reed adjusted course, aiming directly for the gap. At the last possible moment, he cut main engines and fired lateral thrusters, slipping the ship sideways through the opening with centimeters to spare. The pursuing ship, moving too fast to adjust course, had to veer away sharply. Reed immediately reversed thrust, bringing the Horizon Seeker to a near stop in the shadow of one of the asteroids. He held his breath, watching the scanner as the enemy ship circled back, searching. Minutes ticked by. Reed kept all non-essential systems powered down, relying on the asteroid's mass to mask their presence. Finally, the blip on his scanner began to move away, its course taking it out of the debris field. Reed exhaled slowly. They weren't safe yet. The hunters would regroup, probably call for backup, but he'd bought them some time. He restored power to the ship's systems and plotted a new course, one that would take them even further from established routes. He was about to go check on Luma and Jarrah when a flash of movement in the corner of his eye made him spin around. Jarrah stood in the cockpit doorway, her expression unreadable. "I told you to stay in the cabin," Reed said, more sharply than he'd intended. "Wanted to see," she replied, moving to stand beside his chair, looking out at the slowly tumbling debris field. "Wanted to know if you fight for us, or give us back." Reed sighed. "I said I'd protect you. I meant it." Jera studied him for a long moment. "Why, truth now?" Reed hesitated, then decided she deserved honesty. "My sister," he said quietly. 3 years ago, she was taken by slavers while working on a rim colony. By the time I tracked her down," he swallowed hard. "Too late. So now I do what I can, when I can, to make sure it doesn't happen to others. Not enough. Never enough. But something." Jera nodded slowly. "Revenge. Justice," Reed corrected. "Or as close as I can get." Jera made a sound that might have been a laugh, harsh and without humor. "No such thing as justice. Only survival." "Maybe," Reed acknowledged. "But we survive better together, with purpose, than alone with nothing but hate to keep us warm." Jera didn't respond to that, but she didn't leave either. They stood in silence, watching the stars drift by through the cockpit viewport. The following days brought a fragile peace to the Horizon Seeker. Reed altered their course several times, using less traveled routes and the occasional risky jump through unstable space to throw off any pursuit. Luma began spending time in the cockpit, fascinated by the navigation systems and the ever-changing view of space. She had an intuitive grasp of stellar cartography that impressed even Reed. Jera remained more reserved, but the edge of hostility had dulled to cautious observation. She explored the ship methodically, learning its layout, examining its systems. Reed caught her studying the weapons locker one day, but she made no attempt to break the security lock. "You know how to use energy weapons?" he asked, making no move to stop her examination. Jera's hand dropped away from the locker. "Some miners had guns. Watch them." Reed considered her for a moment, then made a decision. He pressed his palm to the security scanner, and the locker clicked open. He removed a small defensive blaster and held it out to her. "Low-powered, short-range," he explained. "Enough to stun most attackers. If you want to learn properly, I can teach you." Jera stared at the weapon, then at Reed. "Why give me this? I could use on you." "You could," Reed agreed, "but I don't think you will, and everyone should have the means to defend themselves." After a moment's hesitation, Jera took the blaster. "Teach me," she said. That afternoon, Reed set up a makeshift target range in the cargo hold. He showed Jera how to hold the weapon, how to aim, how to control her breathing for better accuracy. She was a quick study, her natural athleticism making up for lack of formal training. By the end of 2 hours, she was hitting the target consistently. As they were cleaning up, Luma appeared in the doorway, watching them with curious eyes. "Would you like to learn too?" Reed offered. Luma shook her head, a small smile touching her lips. "No. I make, not break." She held up a piece of paper, actual paper, rare in this digital age, on which she had drawn an intricate pattern of swirling lines and dots. "Star map," she explained. From memory, Reed examined the drawing with amazement. It was a perfect representation of the sector they had passed through the day before, rendered with artistic sensitivity that transformed the cold data of star positions into something beautiful. "This is incredible," he said honestly. Luma's skin flushed a deeper blue, the closest thing to a blush Reed had seen from her. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Reed found a small drawing outside his cabin door, a sketch of the Horizon Seeker flying among stars, rendered in delicate, precise lines. It was Luma's way of saying thank you, he realized. He carefully affixed it to the wall beside his bunk. 2 days later, disaster struck. They had stopped at a remote supply station, little more than an automated warehouse attached to a refueling depot, to restock and make minor repairs. Reed went alone, leaving Luma and Jera aboard the ship with strict instructions to stay out of sight and lock the hatches behind him. The station seemed deserted, except for the maintenance droids that kept it running. Reed quickly gathered the supplies they needed, arranged for refueling, and was heading back to the docking bay when he heard voices. Living voices, not the mechanical tones of droids. He ducked behind a stack of cargo containers, listening. Definitely docked here within the last hour. The tracking device is functioning perfectly. Reed's blood ran cold. Tracking device. He mentally inventoried everything he'd brought aboard since rescuing Luma and Jera. Nothing obvious. Which meant one of them was carrying a tracker. The slavers had planned for theft all along. He abandoned the last of the supplies and ran for the docking bay, taking a circuitous route to avoid being seen. As he rounded the final corner, he saw them, 4 figures in the sleek black armor of professional recovery agents, approaching the Horizon Seeker's docking port. Reed activated his comlink. "Jera, Luma, can you hear me? We have trouble." No response. The comm was being jammed. Reed cursed silently and evaluated his options. 4 against 1, and they were almost certainly better armed. A direct confrontation would be suicide. He needed a distraction. The station's fire suppression system caught his eye. If he could trigger it in another section, the automatic alarms would draw the recovery team away long enough for him to reach the ship. He slipped back down the corridor to the nearest maintenance panel, overrode the security with a code he'd acquired years ago, and set off the fire protocols in the opposite wing of the station. Immediately, klaxons began to wail, and automated announcements instructed all personnel to evacuate the affected areas. The recovery team hesitated, looking toward the source of the alarm. 3 of them remained by the ship, while the 4th jogged off to investigate. Better, but still not good enough. Reed needed them all away from the ship, even if just for a minute. He spotted a cargo loading droid nearby, its simple AI waiting for instructions. Perfect. Reed approached the droid, keeping low behind the containers. "Maintenance override," he whispered, using another stolen code. "Execute Protocol 793. The droid's status light shifted from green to red. Protocol 793 was an emergency dump sequence, designed to quickly clear hazardous materials in the event of a containment breach. Without waiting for confirmation, the droid began grabbing cargo containers and hurling them toward the designated dump chute, which happened to be on the far side of the docking bay. Containers crashed across the deck, creating a cacophony of noise and chaos. The recovery team scattered to avoid being crushed, shouting to each other over the din. Reed seized his chance. He sprinted toward the Horizon Seeker, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. He reached the docking port and slapped his palm against the security scanner. "Emergency override. Authorization Talon Red 7, he gasped. The hatch remained stubbornly closed. Reed frowned, trying again. "Override Talon Red 7. Nothing. Then he understood. Jera and Luma had locked down the ship exactly as he'd instructed, and weren't responding to overrides because they couldn't distinguish his voice from potential attackers through the jamming. "Damn it," Reed muttered. He glanced back. The recovery team had regrouped and spotted him. They were approaching rapidly, weapons drawn. Reed pounded on the hatch. "Jera! Luma! It's me! Open up!" Still nothing. The recovery team was closing in, energy weapons powering up with an ominous whine. In desperation, Reed tried one last tactic. He pressed his face close to the hatch and shouted, "Luma! Your star map! The one you drew! It's beautiful! Please! It's Reed!" For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a hydraulic hiss, the hatch began to open. Reed dove through the narrow opening before it was fully retracted. "Close it!" he shouted. "Close it now!" The hatch reversed direction immediately, sealing just as the first energy blast struck it, leaving a scorched mark on the exterior plating. Reed scrambled to his feet. Luma stood before him, eyes wide with fear. Jera was at the internal control panel, her fingers dancing across the emergency lockdown sequence. "They found us," Luma whispered. "How?" "Tracker," Reed said grimly, already moving toward the cockpit. "One of you is carrying it. We need to get off this station now. Then we'll deal with the tracker." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Reed disengaged the docking clamps without proper clearance, ignoring the automated warnings that blared through the ship's comm system. The recovery team was trying to override the station's security to prevent their departure. But Reed had more experience with these particular systems. He launched the Horizon Seeker with a bone-jarring acceleration that sent loose items flying across the cabin. As soon as they were clear of the station, Reed activated the scanner, searching for pursuit. Nothing yet. But it wouldn't take long for the recovery team to reach their own ship. "We need to find that tracker," he said, setting the autopilot to take them away from the station at maximum sustainable speed. He turned to face Luma and Jera, who had strapped themselves into the passenger seats during the chaotic takeoff. "It has to be on one of you, hidden in your clothing or—" His voice trailed off as a more unpleasant possibility occurred to him. Jera understood immediately. "Implanted," she said flatly. "Under skin." Reed nodded grimly. "Probably. The question is, which one of you has it?" "Me," Luma said quietly. "Has to be me. They—" She swallowed hard. "They did procedure. Before auction. Said it was health check." Reed felt sick. "I have a medical scanner in the emergency kit. Let me check." The scanner confirmed Luma's suspicion. A small tracking device had been implanted at the base of her skull, nestled against the cervical vertebrae. It was a crude but effective method. Removing it without proper medical equipment would be dangerous. "We can't take it out here," Reed said, studying the scan results. "But we can block the signal temporarily." He moved to a storage compartment and retrieved a small device. "Signal jammer. It won't work forever. These trackers are designed to boost their output when they detect jamming, but it'll buy us some time." He activated the jammer and placed it near Luma. The tracking signal would be masked within a 10-meter radius, enough for the confines of the ship. But Luma wouldn't be able to move far from the device. "What now?" Jera asked, her hand resting protectively on Luma's shoulder. Reed checked the scanner again. A ship had launched from the station and was following their ion trail. "Now we run, and we look for somewhere to get that tracker removed safely." They fled through 3 star systems, using every evasive tactic Reed knew. The pursuer was persistent, always just far enough behind to maintain tracking, but never quite closing the gap. The jammer was working, but as Reed had predicted, the tracker was increasing its power output, slowly overcoming the interference. Reed consulted his star charts, looking for options. There was a small medical outpost in the next system, operated by a non-aligned humanitarian organization. They might be able to help, but they'd have to get there before the recovery team caught up. "We're going to make a stop," he told Luma and Jera, who had taken to spending most of their time in the cockpit, unwilling to let Reed out of their sight. "There's a medical station ahead. They might be able to remove the tracker." Luma nodded, her delicate fingers nervously tracing patterns on the armrest of her seat. Jera looked skeptical. "Safe?" she asked. "As safe as anything in this part of space," Reed replied honestly. "They're neutral, dedicated to providing medical care to anyone who needs it, regardless of species or status. But we'll need to be quick. Our friends aren't far behind." The medical outpost was a small, modular structure attached to an asteroid, its dull metal exterior brightened only by the universal symbol for medical services painted on its docking bay doors. Reed transmitted the standard request for emergency medical assistance, and they were granted immediate clearance to dock. "I'll go first," Reed told Luma and Jera as they prepared to disembark. "Stay close to me, and bring the jammer." The outpost's receiving area was sterile and brightly lit, staffed by a single medical droid and a tall, spindly being with 4 arms and phosphorescent green skin. A Nelvidian, a species known for their medical expertise. "Welcome to Outpost Mercy," the Nelvidian said, its voice melodious despite the grave expression on its elongated face. "I am Dr. Elzen. How may we assist you?" Reed quickly explained their situation, omitting certain details, but emphasizing the urgent need to remove the tracking device from Luma's neck. Dr. Elzen's large, faceted eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of concern among Nelvidians. Such a procedure is not without risk, especially given the placement near the spinal column. However, it is certainly within our capabilities. The doctor turned to Luma directly. "With your consent, we can proceed immediately." Luma looked at Reed, then at Jera, uncertainty written across her features. Jera squeezed her hand. "Be brave," she said softly. "I stay close." Luma nodded, turning back to the doctor. "Yes, please." Dr. Elzen led them to a small surgical suite, gesturing for Luma to lie on the central table. The medical droid began preparing instruments, while the doctor studied the scans Reed had taken aboard the ship. "Crude but effective technology," Dr. Elzen commented. "The removal will take approximately 20 minutes. The patient will need to remain conscious, as we must ensure no neural pathways are compromised." Reed checked his portable scanner. The pursuing ship wasn't yet visible in the system, but they couldn't have more than an hour's lead. "We'll need to be quick," he said. "Medicine cannot be rushed," Dr. Elzen replied calmly. "But I understand your concern. We will work efficiently." Reed and Jera waited just outside the surgical suite, watching through a transparent partition as the doctor and droid worked on Luma. Jera paced restlessly, her eyes never leaving the small blue figure on the table. "She is important to you," Reed observed quietly. Jera paused in her pacing. "She is last of my people. I am last of hers. We are connected." "I thought you were from the same world." Jera shook her head. "Same system, different planets. Close together. Always trading. Learning from each other. Her people, artists, scholars, healers. My people, warriors, hunters, protectors." Her expression darkened. "Not protected enough." Reed wanted to ask more, but a warning chime from his scanner interrupted. "They're here," he said grimly. "Entering the system now." Jera's posture immediately shifted to combat readiness. "How long until they reach us?" Reed calculated quickly. 20 minutes. Maybe less if they push their engines. The procedure. 15 minutes remaining, approximately, Jera said, glancing at the chrono on the wall of the surgical suite. "It's going to be close." Reed moved to the outpost's comm station and hailed the medical director's office. "This is Reed Talon from the Horizon Seeker. We have a hostile vessel approaching the outpost. They may attempt forced entry." The response was immediate and calm. "Understood. Horizon Seeker. Outpost Mercy operates under Galactic Protection Protocol 17. Any attempt to breach our facility without medical necessity will trigger an automatic distress call to all nearby enforcement agencies." It was a standard response, and not particularly reassuring given their remote location. But it was better than nothing. Reed returned to Jera's side. "We need to be ready to move as soon as the procedure is complete," he said. "The outpost's protected status might slow them down, but it won't stop them." Jera nodded, her eyes still fixed on Luma. "I protect," she said simply. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Through the partition, Reed could see Dr. Elzen working with precise, unhurried movements. 4 hands moving in perfect coordination with the medical droid's instruments. Luma lay still, her eyes open but unfocused, a neural suppressor preventing pain while keeping her conscious. Reed's scanner beeped again. The pursuing ship had entered orbit around the asteroid. "They're here," he said quietly. As if in response, the outpost's comm system activated. Attention Medical Outpost Mercy. This is Recovery Team Theta 9. We are in pursuit of stolen property currently aboard your facility. Release the property to our custody immediately, or we will be forced to take action. The medical director's response was prompt and formal. Recovery Team Theta 9. This is Medical Outpost Mercy. We are currently engaged in life-saving procedures for all patients under our care. No patient will be released until medically cleared. Any attempt to interfere with medical operations will result in immediate notification to all relevant authorities under Galactic Protection Protocol 17. A tense silence followed, broken only by the soft beeping of medical equipment in the surgical suite. Reed checked his chrono. 5 minutes until the procedure should be complete. The recovery team wouldn't wait much longer. "We need to get to the ship," Reed told Jera. "As soon as Luma is clear, we run. No stopping, no hesitation." Jera nodded, pulling the small blaster Reed had given her from a concealed pocket in her clothing. "Ready!" The surgical suite's door slid open, and Dr. Elzen emerged, holding a small, blood-stained device between two elongated fingers. "The tracker has been removed successfully. The patient is being closed now, and will be ready for transport in approximately 3 minutes. Reed exhaled in relief. "Thank you, Doctor. Your assistance won't be forgotten." Dr. Elzen's expression remained grave. "I should inform you that we have detected an unauthorized attempt to override our docking bay security protocols. I estimate the intruders will breach our outer defenses within 5 minutes. We'll be gone by then," Reed promised. The medical droid emerged from the surgical suite, supporting Luma, who looked pale but steady on her feet. A small bandage at the base of her neck was the only visible sign of the procedure. "You must keep the wound clean and dry," the droid instructed in its mechanical voice. "Avoid sudden movements of the neck for at least 3 standard cycles." Luma nodded carefully, her eyes finding Jera and Reed. "I am ready," she said, her voice stronger than Reed had ever heard it. They moved quickly through the outpost corridors, Reed leading the way with his scanner in hand, tracking the recovery team's progress. The intruders had breached the outer security doors and were moving toward the medical section. "Alternate route," Reed muttered, changing direction down a maintenance corridor. "This should take us to the docking bay without running into them." They were halfway down the corridor when a harsh alarm began to sound throughout the outpost. "Security breach in Section 3, an automated voice announced. "All non-essential personnel evacuate immediately." "They're in," Reed said grimly. "Run!" They sprinted down the corridor, Jera supporting Luma when her steps faltered. The docking bay was just ahead, the Horizon Seeker visible through the transparent doors, still secured to its berth. Reed slapped his hand on the access panel, and the doors slid open. They rushed inside and froze. 2 figures in black armor stood between them and the ship, energy weapons leveled at their chests. "End of the line," one of them said, voice distorted through the helmet speaker. "Hand over the property, and we might let you live, human." Reed's mind raced, evaluating options. His own weapon was holstered at his side, but he'd never get it out before they fired. Jera had her blaster already in hand, but it was pointed at the floor. Luma stood slightly behind them, her blue skin ashen with fear. "They're not property," Reed said, playing for time. "They're people, sentient beings with rights under galactic law." The armored figure made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Save the speeches. We have a contract to fulfill. Now step aside, or die where you stand." Reed tensed, preparing to dive for cover and draw his weapon, knowing it was probably futile. Beside him, he felt Jera shifting her weight subtly, readying herself to move. What happened next was so unexpected that later, Reed would struggle to reconstruct the sequence of events clearly. Luma, silent and seemingly terrified Luma, stepped forward. She drew herself up to her full height, still small by human standards, but suddenly, somehow imposing, and opened her mouth. The sound that emerged was unlike anything Reed had ever heard. It began as a single, pure note, impossibly high, then split into harmonics that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. The sound was beautiful and terrible all at once, resonating in Reed's bones and setting his teeth on edge. The recovery agents staggered backward, dropping their weapons to clutch at their helmets. Through the transparent faceplates, Reed could see blood trickling from their noses and ears. "Now!" Luma shouted, her voice hoarse. "Reed! Jera, run!" Reed shook off his momentary paralysis and lunged forward, grabbing one of the fallen energy weapons. Jera was already moving, her blaster trained on the disoriented recovery agents as she circled toward the ship. They reached the Horizon Seeker's hatch, Reed quickly entering the access code. As the door slid open, he heard shouts from the corridor. The rest of the recovery team had arrived. "Inside!" he ordered, ushering Luma and Jera through the hatch. Energy blasts struck the hull around them, leaving scorched impact points on the metal. Reed returned fire, providing cover as Jera helped Luma aboard. He was about to follow when a blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. Pain exploded through his upper body, and he could smell his own burned flesh. Through a haze of agony, he saw Jera reappear in the hatchway. Without hesitation, she leapt down beside him, firing rapidly at the advancing recovery team, forcing them to take cover. "Go!" Reed gasped. "Get Luma out of here!" Jera ignored him. With surprising strength, she hauled him to his feet and, half-dragged, half-carried him toward the ship. Energy blasts sizzled through the air around them. They tumbled through the hatch together, Jera immediately slapping the emergency close control. The door sealed shut just as another volley of blasts struck it, leaving glowing impact marks on the interior. "Cockpit," Reed managed through gritted teeth. "Need to launch. Override docking clamps." Jera helped him to the cockpit, where Luma was already seated at the navigation console, her delicate fingers flying over the controls with unexpected confidence. "I watch you," she explained, seeing Reed's surprised expression. "Learn quickly." Reed collapsed into the pilot's seat, fighting through the pain to initiate the launch sequence. "Docking clamps. Security override." "Done," Luma said quietly. "I remember codes." The ship shuddered as the recovery team attempted to force entry through the cargo hatch. Alarms blared, warning of an imminent hull breach. Reed hit the emergency launch protocol, overriding all safety measures. The Horizon Seeker's engines roared to life, tearing it free of the remaining docking mechanisms with a screech of tortured metal. They shot from the outpost like a projectile from an ancient firearm, acceleration pressing them back into their seats. "They follow," Jera said, watching the scanner. The recovery team's ship was disengaging from its docking position, preparing to pursue. Reed tried to focus through the pain, setting a course that would take them into the densest part of a nearby asteroid field. It was risky, but the Horizon Seeker was more maneuverable than the larger pursuit vessel. "What was that?" he asked Luma, as they accelerated away from the outpost. "That sound you made." Luma's expression was solemn. "Song of ending," she said softly. "Sacred knowledge, used only in greatest need, greatest danger, disrupts nervous system of most species." She looked down at her hands. "Not meant as weapon, meant for passing to next realm, to ease dying." Reed nodded, understanding dawning. "A funeral song, but you used it to save us." "To protect family," Luma corrected, looking from Reed to Jera and back again. "My choice." The word family hung in the air between them, unexpected and profound. The moment was broken by a warning klaxon. The pursuing ship had fired its first volley, the energy blasts dissipating harmlessly against the Horizon Seeker's rear shields. "They're faster," Reed said grimly. "We won't outrun them to the asteroid field." Jera moved to the weapons console. "Teach me," she said, her voice hard with determination. "How to fire back." Reed quickly explained the targeting system. The Horizon Seeker wasn't heavily armed, just defensive weaponry meant to discourage pirates. But in skilled hands, it might buy them time. Jera proved a natural. Her first volley forced the pursuit vessel to break off its attack run, giving them precious seconds to increase the distance. Reed's vision was beginning to blur from pain and blood loss. The emergency medical kit was in the storage compartment behind the cockpit, but he couldn't leave the controls, not with their lives depending on his piloting skills. As if reading his thoughts, Luma rose from her seat. "I get," she said simply, disappearing into the rear compartment. She returned moments later with the medical kit, quickly applying a pressure bandage and pain blocker to Reed's wounded shoulder. "Thank you," he managed, feeling the medication beginning to work, clearing his head slightly. The pursuit continued, a deadly dance through space. Jera's defensive fire kept the recovery team at bay, but they were relentless, maneuvering for a clear shot at the Horizon Seeker's engines. Finally, the edge of the asteroid field came into view, a chaotic mass of tumbling rock and ice, ranging from pebble-size to chunks larger than the ship itself. "Hold on," Reed warned, guiding the ship into the field. "This is going to get rough." He navigated by instinct as much as skill, threading the Horizon Seeker through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, using the larger asteroids as shields against enemy fire. Behind them, the pursuit vessel was forced to slow, its larger size making it more vulnerable to collision. For nearly an hour, they wove through the asteroid field, the distance between them and their pursuers gradually increasing. Reed's shoulder throbbed despite the medication, and exhaustion pulled at his consciousness. But he kept going, pushing himself and the ship to their limits. Finally, they emerged on the far side of the field. The scanner showed the pursuit vessel still trapped within the asteroids, having fallen far behind. Reed sagged in his seat, the adrenaline that had kept him going beginning to ebb. "We've got some breathing room," he said wearily. "Not much, but some." Jera remained at the weapons console, her posture still tense. "Where now?" It was a good question. They couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, the recovery team would catch up, or worse, they'd call in reinforcements. "We need to end this," Reed said slowly, an idea forming. "Not just escape them, but stop them for good." Luma and Jera looked at him expectantly. "The tracking device," Reed continued. "We still have it?" Luma nodded. "Doctor gave to me." She produced a small, sealed medical container from her pocket. "Good. Here's what we're going to do." The plan was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but it was the only way Reed could see to truly free Luma and Jera from the shadow of pursuit. They would use the recovery team's own tactics against them. While Jera piloted the ship, she had picked up the basics quickly. Reed worked in the cargo hold, modifying the tracker. He carefully removed the actual tracking component and attached it to a small drone, one of several he kept aboard for external ship inspections. Then he added something extra, a data crystal containing visual records he had made since rescuing Luma and Jera. Everything from the auction to their escape, all carefully edited to highlight the women's sentience, their personhood, their rights. Luma assisted him, her delicate fingers able to manage the finest adjustments that his larger human hands struggled with. She worked silently, but there was a new confidence in her movements, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. "Almost ready," Reed said, securing the last connection. "Now we just need the right moment." That moment came sooner than expected. The recovery team's ship emerged from the asteroid field and immediately locked onto their position, closing the distance rapidly. "They're targeting our engines," Jera reported from the cockpit. "Shields at 60%. Reed activated the drone, programming its course. "When I give the word, cut all power except life support. Make it look like they hit something critical." Jera nodded, her fingers poised over the controls. The pursuing ship fired again, the impact rocking the Horizon Seeker. "Now," Reed commanded. Jera cut the power. The ship went dark, drifting silently through space, appearing crippled and vulnerable. Reed released the drone through a small maintenance hatch. The tiny machine sped toward the recovery vessel, its trajectory calculated to make it appear as if it had been accidentally ejected during the power failure. "They're moving in," Jera reported, watching the scanner's emergency backup display. "Preparing to board." "Let them think they've won," Reed said. "Just a few more minutes." The drone attached itself to the hull of the recovery vessel, exactly as planned. Its small magnetic clamps would secure it in place, while its onboard transmitter broadcast the tracking signal. Meanwhile, the data crystal began uploading its contents directly into the ship's communication system. The recovery team, believing they had disabled the Horizon Seeker, would soon discover their error. But by then, it would be too late. The data crystal contained not only the evidence of Luma and Jera's sentience and right to freedom, but also a virus that would lock the recovery team's controls for 30 minutes. More than enough time for the Horizon Seeker to escape. And the tracker? It would lead any other recovery teams not to the Horizon Seeker, but to their own colleagues. "Power up," Reed ordered, as the recovery vessel came to a complete stop, hovering less than 100 meters away. "Maximum thrust, now." Jera slammed the power controls forward. The Horizon Seeker's engines flared to life, the sudden acceleration pushing them back into their seats. They shot past the surprised recovery vessel, which remained motionless, its systems temporarily paralyzed by the uploaded virus. Reed allowed himself a tight smile as they sped away. That should keep them busy for a while, and any other teams they call in will be chasing their own tails. "What now?" Luma asked, her luminous eyes fixed on Reed. It was a question with no simple answer. They were free for the moment. But what did freedom mean for the last two survivors of a destroyed civilization? What did it mean for a human who had spent years fighting a losing battle against an entrenched system of exploitation? "Now," Reed said slowly, "we decide together." In the days that followed, as the Horizon Seeker journeyed deeper into the uncharted regions of the Outer Rim, the three fugitives began to forge something none of them had expected: a future. Reed's shoulder healed slowly, the energy weapon's damage leaving a star-shaped scar that pulled uncomfortably when he moved too quickly. Jera took over more of the piloting duties, her natural aptitude for spatial navigation making her a quick study. Luma, meanwhile, transformed the ship's small common area with her artwork, intricate drawings of star systems, both familiar and strange, galaxies swirling with color and light, and increasingly, portraits of her companions. One evening cycle, as they shared a meal in the galley, Reed broached the subject that had been on his mind. "We need to think about what comes next," he said. "We've evaded the recovery team, but the Venaxian Trade Consortium won't give up easily. They'll keep looking." Jera set down her utensil, her purple features solemn. "Fight back," she said simply. "Not just run. Stop them." Reed nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Not just for you two, but for others like you. The auction houses are getting bolder, operating in systems where they should have no foothold." "How?" Luma asked. "We are three. They are many." Reed smiled slightly. "Sometimes it's not about numbers. It's about information, about changing minds." He gestured to Luma's drawings, pinned to the galley wall. "Your people were artists, storytellers. What's the most powerful weapon against injustice?" "Truth," Luma whispered, understanding dawning in her luminous eyes. "Exactly. I've been recording everything since the auction house, documenting the conditions, the treatment, the clear evidence that you and others like you are sentient beings with rights, not property to be bought and sold. If we can get that evidence to the right people—" "Who are right people?" Jera asked skeptically. "There are more than you might think. The Galactic Council is deeply divided on the issue of sentient trafficking. Many worlds have already banned the practice, but enforcement is weak, and the trade continues in shadow. With concrete evidence, the reformers could force real action. Luma nodded slowly. I will tell my story. Our story. She reached out, taking Jera's hand. For those who cannot speak. It will be dangerous, Reed warned. The consortiums have powerful allies, even within the council. Jera's expression hardened. Already dangerous. Better to die fighting than running. They spent the next several months preparing. Reed reached out to contacts in the Sentient Rights Commission, arranging for a secure transmission of their evidence. Luma created powerful visual testimony, not just drawings, but written accounts of what had happened to her world, her people. Jera trained relentlessly, honing her combat skills and learning the ship's systems inside and out, determined that they would never be taken by surprise again. Finally, the day came. They transmitted their evidence simultaneously to the Commission, to selected council representatives known for their reform stance, and, most daringly, to the public information networks of a dozen major worlds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The images of Luma and Jera, the last survivors of devastated worlds, their clear sentience and personhood contrasted with their treatment as property, struck a chord that resonated across the galaxy. Protests erupted on worlds where trafficking had been tolerated through indifference or ignorance. Councils convened emergency sessions. The Venaxian Trade Consortium issued furious denials, but the evidence was irrefutable. 3 weeks after their transmission, Reed received a secure communication from the Commission. They were being summoned to testify before the Galactic Council itself. It's a risk, Reed told Luma and Jera as they considered the invitation. We'd be exposing ourselves. The consortium might try to silence us permanently. Or recapture, Jera added grimly. Luma was quiet for a long moment, studying the star chart on the navigation console. Finally, she looked up, her expression resolute. We go, she said. Speak truth. Face fear. Reed nodded slowly. Together, then. The journey to the council homeworld was tense but uneventful. They traveled under Commission protection, escorted by security vessels that, while not particularly impressive, at least provided a visible deterrent against direct attack. Reed remained vigilant nonetheless, never fully trusting the system he had spent so long operating outside of. The council chamber was vast, a soaring dome of crystal and light, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of worlds. Tiered seating surrounded a central speaking platform, where petitioners could address the assembled delegates. The chamber was filled to capacity, a testament to the impact their evidence had already made. As Reed, Luma, and Jera were led to the platform, a hush fell over the assembly. They stood together, 3 unlikely companions united by circumstance and choice, facing the collected power of a galactic civilization. The chief counselor, a venerable Tellurian with skin like aged parchment, spoke first. We have reviewed the evidence you provided and find it disturbing. The council wishes to hear directly from those most affected. Who will speak for your group? Reed started to step forward, then stopped. This wasn't his story to tell. Not really. He looked at Luma, then at Jera. Luma took a deep breath, then moved to the center of the platform. Her blue skin seemed to glow under the chamber's lights, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the vast space. I am Luma, last daughter of Lumira Prime. This is Jera, last daughter of Jera Secundus. We are all that remains of once vibrant civilizations, destroyed by those who valued minerals above lives, profit above people. She paused, gathering herself. We come before you not as victims seeking pity, but as survivors demanding justice, not just for ourselves, but for all those who have been reduced to property, stripped of voice and choice and dignity. A murmur ran through the assembly. Luma continued, her voice growing stronger. You have seen the evidence of what was done to us, to our worlds. You have seen how we were catalogued, caged, auctioned like animals. But what you cannot see, what no recording can fully convey, is what it feels like to be the last, to carry the weight of an entire civilization's memory, knowing that when you are gone, it vanishes forever. She gestured to Reed. This human taught us that compassion exists even in the darkest places. That one person, acting with courage and conviction, can change the course of lives. Now, we ask you, representatives of 1,000 worlds, will you act? Will you ensure that what happened to us happens to no others? Or will you look away, as so many have before? The chamber was utterly silent. Then, unexpectedly, Jera stepped forward to stand beside Luma. "I am warrior," she said, her grasp of the common language still imperfect, but her meaning unmistakable. "Born to protect, failed my world, will not fail again." She looked around the chamber, her gaze challenging. "You talk of laws, of rights, words, show action, end slave trade, punish those who profit, or we fight. We three against all, will not stop." Her fierce declaration hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Reed moved to stand with them, a silent affirmation of her words. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from the upper tier, a delegate rose, a representative from a world Reed didn't recognize, humanoid, but with distinctive ridged features. "My people were once enslaved," the delegate said, voice resonating through the chamber. "For generations, we were treated as beasts of burden, our children born into bondage. We have not forgotten. I move that this council immediately form a task force with real enforcement power to eliminate all forms of sentient trafficking, beginning with the auction houses." Another delegate stood, "Seconded. And I further move that we grant immediate protected status to the survivors of Lumira and Jera, with full citizenship rights and reparations from the corporations responsible for the devastation of their worlds." One by one, delegates rose to support the motions. Not all, Reed noted with grim satisfaction, which worlds remained seated, mentally marking them as likely havens for the trade. But enough. A clear majority. The chief counselor raised a gnarled hand for silence. "The will of the council is clear. The motions are carried. A task force will be formed immediately, with representatives from law enforcement, the Sentient Rights Commission, and..." The ancient eyes fixed on Reed, Luma, and Jera, those with direct experience of the trade's abuses. As they left the chamber, surrounded by congratulatory delegates and commission officials, Reed felt a strange mixture of triumph and trepidation. They had won a victory, certainly, but experience had taught him that official pronouncements rarely translated to immediate change. The real work was just beginning. Luma seemed to sense his thoughts. "Not end," she said quietly, taking his hand. "Beginning." Jera nodded, her purple features set in determined lines. "We fight smart now, with words, with laws, but still fight." Reed squeezed Luma's hand, feeling the delicate strength in her fingers. "Together," he affirmed. "Always together." In the years that followed, the galaxy witnessed a transformation. The task force, with Reed, Luma, and Jera as key members, moved against the auction houses with unprecedented determination. Many closed voluntarily, seeing the change in the political winds. Others fought, sometimes violently, but faced with coordinated enforcement and growing public outrage, they eventually succumbed. The Venaxian Trade Consortium, once seemingly untouchable, found itself the target of investigations that revealed corruption and abuses far beyond what even Reed had suspected. Its leaders faced trials and reparation judgments that reduced the once mighty organization to a shadow of its former self. Luma and Jera became symbols of resilience and hope. They traveled to worlds across the galaxy, speaking to audiences of all species about their experiences and the ongoing fight for sentient rights. Luma's artwork, depicting both the beauty of her lost world and the horrors of trafficking, was exhibited in the finest galleries and museums, bringing emotional weight to what might otherwise have remained abstract political debates. Jera found her calling in training the task force's enforcement teams, teaching them to recognize the signs of trafficking and to respect the dignity of those they rescued. Her fierce protectiveness extended now to hundreds of beings freed from situations similar to her own. And Reed? He continued to pilot the Horizon Seeker, now officially commissioned as a rapid response vessel for the task force. But the ship was no longer his alone. It had become home to a family forged in adversity, bound not by blood, but by choice and shared purpose. One quiet evening, as they orbited a beautiful blue-green world newly opened to settlement, Reed found Luma in the observation dome, sketching the planet below. "Beautiful," he commented, looking over her shoulder at the drawing. Luma nodded. "Reminds me of home. A little." "The Council has approved your request," Reed said. "The world is officially designated as a memorial sanctuary for Lumiran and Jaren culture. No mining, no exploitation, just preservation and remembrance." Luma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "It was your idea, your petition," Reed reminded her. "You did this." "Not alone," she said, looking up at him with a smile. "Never alone." Later, as they shared the news with Jera over dinner in the galley, Reed found himself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had brought them to this moment. From a shadowy auction house to the halls of galactic power. From three frightened, wounded beings to a family united in purpose. "What you thinking?" Jera asked, noticing his distraction. Reed smiled. "About choices. About how sometimes the right choice feels impossible until you make it." Jera nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Like when you say, 'I take them at auction.'" "Exactly like that." Luma reached out, taking both their hands in hers. "Some choices make new family," she said softly. "Some choices make new world." Reed squeezed her hand gently. "And sometimes," he added, "they do both." Outside the viewport, stars streaked by as the Horizon Seeker continued its journey. Not running now, but moving forward. Not alone, but together. Not merely surviving, but building something new from the ashes of what had been lost. Too wild and too gentle, the auctioneer had called them. Useless, the crowd had jeered. But Reed had seen their worth, their strength, their humanity. A humanity that had nothing to do with species and everything to do with spirit. And in choosing to stand with them, he had found not only purpose, but family. Not only justice, but healing. Not only companions, but home. The stars continued their eternal dance outside the viewport, bearing witness to three souls who had found, against all odds, exactly where they belonged, with each other.